Shalom, one of self souls by giving no praise to Yahweh, Ba'Shem Yahushua, Ba'Shem Kadash. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone, and honors to you brothers doing the work of the Most High in truth and in sincerity. Yahweh's real name, of whom the world ignorantly calls God, Jehovah, or Yahweh. His real name is Yahweh. His son's true name is Yahweh Shai, and when we pray Yahweh, Ba'Shem Yahushua, Ba meaning in, Ha meaning the, and Sham meaning name, so Yahweh and the name of Yahweh Shai. Right. So this is just a quick one. We were basically talking, just in the chat. I forgot what it was. It was about something about birth rate, came up. And one of the things that I've looked at is just this idea of, generations left, if you will. So this is what, for instance, before we even start, this is why, the scriptures say this, right? This is Matthew 24 and 22, written in red. So Yahweh Shai said this, saying that except those days should be shortened, they should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Okay? Because he's basically pushing about policies, right, that are ultimately destructive and deadly, whether it's by way of witchcraft, right, or by way of financial, policies, right, that has basically, made it nigh on impossible for anyone to really have children. Right, this is originally talking about Antiochus. We can apply it today. It's Daniel 8:25, and through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. Right, and he shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. Right, and that is, part of that is his policies. Right, is all of this different legislation that he pushed, right, to basically get where we are, right, and we're in a place where it's just death and the lack of life, right. Isaiah 10 from the top: woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed. So the Lord has given the power to basically make up laws to set the direction of the world, right. And in his rulership he has been found to be not worthy. Okay, because here it is, the Most High. What was the Most High's commandment? Right, and in fact, it's in when you actually look for it, it's in a few places in Genesis, right? So I'm just so you see it there. So you see it in Genesis 1, Genesis 8, 9, right? But let me grab this one, right? I would grab the one. Said to Noah, right? It says, and the Most High blessed Noah and his sons and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. Right, and the fact that once again you see it in such a few, in a number of places, right, is because that's the Most High is about life, okay, not like Esau who is about death, okay. So let's say, so I'm just trying to get the image, right, in my right hand, sorry, in my other screen, right. Just want one that gets straight to the point. You see, right? Because this is what Esau's on, right? Open image. Come on, man. And then what I want to do is now do that, right? But this is what Esau's on, right? Here it is. You read the scripture speaks about be fruitful and multiply, right? But Esau's tenet, right? You see, maintain humanity under 500 million, right, in perpetual balance with nature. Okay, so that's what it is, right? So we maintain humanity under 500. Esau, that's what it is in Esau's ideology, right? Maintaining humanity under 500 million, right? But the Most High's not with that, right? And once Esau's gotten away with, right, getting rid of, right, we go and populate, right? Even just on that. Let me keep that open and I'll get it in another tab, right? This is Isaiah 60, right, and 22, right? It says, and a little one shall become 1,000, and a small one a strong nation. Yahweh will hasten it in its time. And that's going into basically having lots and lots of children, man. Right? We're going to be getting it in the kingdom, right? But let's jump back to this, right? This is Ask the Robot. It said there are several countries with extremely low birth rates, right? Assuming these birth rates stay constant, show an accurate table of countries with the fewest generations left and the countries with the most generations left. Verify your sources and double check that your results are factual. Okay. Now the reason this came up once again in conversation was this idea that you would think that this would be a national security kind of problem, but alas, Esau, as we see here, right, Esau has an agenda that he wants to fulfill. Okay. You may be like, oh yeah, but these are it's listing countries in this place, listing countries in that place, but the problem is it's like they're still Edomite policies, right? So it says, here's a clean apples to apples way to answer your questions. Now show the math and the sources are used so you can verify everything. I define, quote, generations left as how many generations it will take if today's fertility stayed constant, ignoring migration and mortality, right? Which is why you're seeing, migration increasing in certain of these, nations, or nations becoming more open to immigration, right? Because if people ain't having youths, guess what? Right, that nation ceases to exist, right? And when you actually look at England as an example, right, you actually see that the UK also has quite a bad birth rate, right? But when you extrapolate by borough, right, and you so like, let me rephrase that because I'm trying to look for it in my sometimes you used to TF by let's say city UK. Let me do that instead, right? Yeah, when you look at the data, right, you actually see that the birth rate is bad as well in the UK. It's just we have a lot of immigration, right? So this is the one that I want, right? So move over to this tab. Okay, so 0.63, right, is these places here. So South Lakeland, right? That's 1.32. That's not too bad. 1.41. So where is it saying 0.63? In those kinds of areas, right? But then really when you start looking into these really dark bits as an example, so the first thing you kind of know is these really London and Southeast, you got darker bits, right? But you get these really really dark bits, right, which is where you're more likely to have a lot of immigration. So Barking and Dagenham, right, is 2, right, which is way above replacement rate. Okay. And that's an area where you get a lot of Jake, right? Redbridge as well, right? Hillingdon, Harrow, I think that's where you get like a lot of Elam, right, and stuff like that, right? And Essex, you a lot of white Jake, right? Peterborough area as well. I think you get a lot of I remember read, but I won't say it because I don't fully remember what kind of persons people live there. And obviously Brum, Birmingham, and that Manny, right, and places like that. Okay, so it's not really that bad in the UK. Looking at this data again, right? 1.5. That's still above. I think that's still a bit above replacement rate. But you can certainly see that immigration is having a lot to do with that. Okay, so we go back to the data wherever it is, right? So then you say, mathematically, if a country's total fertility rate T, then the number of daughters per woman is T over 2, right, which I did have to verify with the importance of that, which was actually kind of obvious, right? So the daughters per woman column is here because population replacements depends on women giving birth to daughters who will themselves eventually reproduce. Okay, so yeah, you got all of that, right? And you can pause it and read because I'm not going to read all of this stuff, right? And then the worst one in the world, right, South Korea with with basically 63 years to 10%, right? So basically 2.5, well, less than 2.5, 2.35 generations left. Okay, and this is why, once again, I'll read it again, right? Why this idea of policy, right? Daniel 8:25 again, right? And through his policy, right? I once again referring to Antiochus, right? It says, through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. Okay, because what's contrary to what you kind of hear, Western women, speak about in reference to why the Korean birth rate is so low, right? Because in Korean society, being single is problematic, right? They're a very image focused nation, and part of that image is having a perfect coupling, right? But then when you look into certain of the um, uh, employment laws, right? Because in South Korea, women are second class citizens, right? So it's like in the employment law, if they get pregnant, there's a good chance they may not keep their job. But then it's like housing is stupidly expensive. So then people just stay with their parents longer and longer to save up as much money as possible. And then they do in their customs, they'll move in together at the point of marriage. Okay, and so that is all a policy shift, right? When you look at the kind of companies that Korea produces, your Samsungs, your Hyundais, your Kias, which Hyundai, Kia, the same thing, right? And and when you look at Samsung is an absolutely massive conglomerate, right? Which, let me grab the meaning of that one, right? Some will say MNC, multinational corporation, conglomerate, a company that owns several smaller businesses whose products or services are usually very different, right? Which is exactly what it is. Okay, and by doing this, having companies like that, who are they basically building stuff for? They're building stuff for America, right? So what you really see in Korea and in Japan, right, are basically countries that are that are basically what's this word, sweatshops for Esau. Okay, so you see there, South Korea is the worst with 63, so 2.35 generations left basically. What was surprising, I didn't know Italy and Spain were this low as well. So basically 4 generations of Spaniards left, right? And Japan used to be really bad. It used to be quite low, but even there. So the thing is, we speak about Japan having a low one, but they're actually above Spain and Malta now, right? And Italy as well, right? According to this data, right? But then when you look at the the opposite spectrum, right? The opposite end of the spectrum, right? You got Nepal, right? And you got Sri Lanka, Philippines, and Vietnam, right? And then it basically says here, if TFR is more than replacement rates, is about 2.1 in most developed settings, the population wouldn't shrink to 10% under this thought experiment. So generations left is effectively infinite, right? So it says examples with recent TFRs of more than 2, right? TFR, I don't know if I explained it, total fertility rate, right? Which, although this is talking about, them over there, right? I find it very interesting that Israel, right, is 2.85, right? According to the World Bank, right? Because once again, that's going to be us in the kingdom. Let's read. We read it before. We'll touch on again. Right, Isaiah 60:22. A little one shall become 1,000, and a small one a strong nation. Yahweh will hasten it in His time. Right, because so in the kingdom, we're just going to be having babies. Right, they ain't gonna be this worry now of, oh, how am I gonna pay for them, right, and stuff like that, right? The Lord is basically gonna have it such that we're gonna be able to enjoy it. No miscarriages, no dying in childbirth and any of that. No, we're just gonna be getting it in, right, and literally seeing the fruit of our labors, right? So Psalms 127:3 says, "Lo, children are an heritage of Yahweh, and the fruit of Yahweh of the womb is His reward." Right, so that's the rewards. One of the rewards, right? As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate. Right, so having children is very much a blessing of the Lord, although in this captivity it may not always feel that way. Okay, but ultimately it is a blessing of the Lord, and we'll be able to truly enjoy that in the kingdom. Okay, where it says quiver full of them, we're gonna be, seeing this chick, pew, getting it in, seeing that chick, pew, getting it in, right? And that's why the Lord is gonna have to enlarge the tent, man. This is Isaiah 54:2. It says, enlarge. What's this going into? Right, yeah, so Isaiah 54:2, right? Enlarge the place of thy tent and let them stretch forth the curtains of thine habitations, spare not, lengthen thy cords and strengthen thy stakes. Right, so the earth is gonna have to be enlarged, right? Just because of that's how many children we're gonna be having. We're going, because remember, we ain't dying either. Okay. So that's it, just a complete contrast to Esau's world, right? Where you've got, a whole heap of nations that are basically not producing, right? And they're not producing for several reasons, but policy is certainly one of those policies, right? So, like I said, was kind of found that interesting. Just once again, this idea of what's the word? This idea of just generations left, right? And it's just a reminder of why the Lord has to come back, because with his technology, right, he's gonna do his best to lower this even more. Okay, so as always, Lord's will does edifying. Till next time we say Shalom.